Speaking of,
especially.
I was about to say actually, this gives the sense of a very healthy writers' room. As we were saying in the Defenders, all of it was first draft placeholder garbage, whereas this, it really feels like there was a group of people that sat down and had these conversations that we're having right now about
Yeah,
motivation and place and uh, feeling. Yeah.
and if anyone's wondering why the modern Marvel stuff doesn't feel the same, the TV shows, the movies and stuff, it's because they tried to get rid of all the writers' rooms. It's a big part of what SAG-AFTRA and the strikes were trying to enforce is like, if you're going to do this stuff, you need to do it properly. You need to have a writers' room. You need to have a writer on on retainer for the editing process to make sure that there's consistency, to help fix little plot holes because we didn't get coverage on that day, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's a healthy bunch of people who want to make this show, is the way it feels.
Mm. Yeah.
They're not just they're not collecting a check. They are like here. They're present in the thing that's happening. And that's, I mean, yeah, that's where all good art is found, in my opinion. It's people passionate about doing it, passionate about the craft, and then also people passionate about knowing when not to overthink shit. And when just going, I think this is right, and just trusting, like you said, trusting the show.
Everything you're describing right here is exactly the sense that I get from watching the director's commentaries on the Better Call Saul episodes, because they bring in a bunch of the production and the writers to talk over it, and yeah, it's like it's exactly what you're describing, just like equal parts passion, enthusiasm, readiness, preparation, and also equal parts inspiration and like an easiness and a consideration for stuff that's not in your in your view, like a I don't know, a temperament to storytelling almost, like and
I
that's
like
why
that, yeah.
that show works. Yeah.
I like that temperament to storytelling. That's actually a really good way of describing that. Yeah. I think it's something that's so hard to communicate because it's not it's something that I've trying to explain across a length of time and some other content I'm working on that I'm helping produce. There's the difference between being I'm trying to like mediate who is an artist and who isn't, but when you're in the craft and when you're in the space and like this is all I think about for the most part. Like, it's just all this rallying around. All the podcasts I listen to are about storytelling and all this stuff. It's all I'm thinking about. It's all the books I read. I'm always reading fiction, and if it's nonfiction, you better believe it's a textbook about writing, right? Or it's meditations on end stage capitalism, etc. I think there's a when people say things like, "Oh, this franchise, got bad after this," or the fans are owed this, or this and the third thing. The second they start talking in that space, I become immediately suspicious of an absence of that temperament. If you listen to, I might put a snippet in because I was watching a couple last night, a couple interviews with Tony Gilroy after Andor and sort of in the lead up to Andor season 2. Which is still quite a ways away because of the strike, which is good. A big part of what he talks about in that process is like they start to talk about Star Wars, and he's like, I don't care about Star Wars. I think Star Wars is pretty bad. What it gave us an opportunity to do was tell a story that all of us in the room were so eager to tell. It felt so like arresting and urgent for us to tell this story. And it's exactly what you just described is the way he talks about it, which is like, it's an urgency and an eagerness, but open. Right? It's an open eagerness and an open urgency. It's not a I have a vision and I'm right and we need to follow my vision. It's like, how can we all collectively make this better and bring out the best in each other from a disciplinary perspective?
We had a very short 5-day writer's room with my brother Dan Gilroy and Bo Willimon and Luke Hull, who's our production designer, was there, and Zana Wallenberg was there watching. And we just blitzed through. I had about 100 pages of stuff, and the beginning and the end, but we wanted a prison. And we didn't want to do a prison, as I said before, we didn't want to do a prison unless we could do something absolutely spectacular and fresh, because there's so many great prison movies, and if we can't do it, then if we can't find something new. And at some point, I really don't remember, and they don't remember either, someone said, well, what about electric floors? And we're like, oh, well, what about this? And this prison started to emerge, this behavioral. And we went back the next day, and then we have to start figuring out what it is they're making and how many guys on the floor and what should it be like. And it's like building a watch. What are you going to do? And I think everybody kind of jumped on the idea right away. It's like, well, what if he's building the thing that's going to kill him, you know? And we were really surprised at it. I mean, I think some people must have picked up on it along the way. But we were really surprised at the number of people that were actually shocked by when we thought that would be, but it came up in the planning.
Yeah, I always get the sense that it's just a bunch of sensible people that sort of have an inkling for, you know, like, one, they all have good taste in art, but they all have this inkling for what makes good art, and they all sort of, I mean, you know, having, you know, a bit of background in film production, I've experienced this where, like, something comes along once in a while during production or pre-production that is kind of out of left field, but then everyone has this feeling that, like, it's appropriate but also, you know, stylish and inspired. And there are these moments where you identify, like, that this patch fits very well into this fabric that we're making right here, and yeah.
It's because it's I mean, I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about at the end of the season, and I guess how we end up feeling about where this ends up going, and how, I don't know, like, how you can feel the apparatus behind this change, perhaps, as the paratext around this show alters what's happening. But yeah, I completely agree. I think this is just it is different than the Defenders in that way, it's almost ineffable. I think we did a pretty good job of sketching its outline, but I mean, that probably doesn't do it justice. I'm sure at some point, I mean, that's the work of, like, all artists, is in some capacity trying to sketch around what those things are for them. And a big thing that I would say, especially if you're, you know, I think most people that listen to these types of shows that we do, and I know for this particular podcast feed in particular, it's people either interested in how stories work or interested in telling their own. And if you're that kind of person where you want to get into thinking and talking, or even doing this stuff, the biggest, most important thing is, like, learn to develop taste. And it doesn't have, like, you and I have similar tastes, and I think there is, like, good types of taste and bad types of taste. That's actually not true. Taste is, like, purely subjective. But the important thing is, like, you need to develop strong, articulated taste. Like, you need to watch something that everyone else thinks is good and be like, wow, they could have done these things way better. This is so mid. I can't believe they didn't go for this thing. Or, you know, I watched Succession and I was like, nah, I'm good. I've seen all of these maneuvers. I'm fine, actually. And it's just because it's not for me. It's not doing the things that I'm interested in. And everyone's, it's the best show ever, this, that, the third thing. And a big part of taste is you have to go out and consume a bunch of stuff that you don't think you'll like until you start to find whatever the niche is, right? I didn't even have a word for the stories that I tell until, like, 3 years ago. Like, I am obsessed with, like, Dying Earth science fantasy, which are two genre modes. I didn't have verbiage, like, there was no verbiage around them to create nouns because I wasn't aware of the kind of 80s slingshot into that, you know, because I'd only really read, like, Gene Wolfe's early stuff. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make there is, if you're looking for a cheat code, right, and there is no life hack, you're going to find all these tips and tricks on how to tell stories. That stuff only works because those are tools in the tool belt. You still have to find the direction, and the way that you start to find the direction is by developing a voice. The way you find a voice is initially by developing strong, articulated taste. And those things take time and effort and reflection, and it might help to trickle of your